Hello, I'm Michael Depp, editor of TVNewsCheck, and I'm with Fernando Hurtado, a reporter at NBC LX, and we are talking TV. Talking TV is made possible by Making the Media, a podcast from Avid exploring the forces that shape the media, news, and entertainment business. The latest episode tackles the subjects of diversity and inclusion within the TV industry. Host Craig Wilson talks with Deborah Williams, Executive Director of the Creative Diversity Network in the UK. Making the Media is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, and other podcast platforms. Welcome, Fernando.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm very glad to have you here and always happy to talk about NBC LX, which is a very novel reporting project out of NBC. Just for those who aren't familiar with it at the top, could you just describe what this reporting initiative and project and channel is?
Yeah, so NBC LX is part of the NBC Universal Local umbrella. So if you're familiar with NBC New York, the NBC Chicago's, NBC Dallas Fort Worth of the world, we're part of that family. And our mission is really to attract younger audiences across the country with different forms of storytelling and really, I don't want to say reinvent, but certainly explore different ways of telling news stories to a younger generation of news consumers.
And this is a project that has expanded in its carriage and distribution quite a bit since it began, grown a lot as an endeavor inside of NBC Universal Local, and just doing all sorts of novel things. And I've enjoyed looking at your work for quite a while now. Connect the Dots is the project that I want to talk about with you today. It's a very novel reporting concept, and you are one of a number of contributors to this series of stories. Can you explain what the concept is?
Yeah, so I think the best way to describe it is a journalistic scavenger hunt. So the premise here is that a reporter draws the names of three things at random. So picture three bowls, and one bowl has names of a bunch of events. The second bowl has names of a bunch of issues. So it could be inequality, it could be access to water, for example. And then the third bowl has names of different objects. So random items like a phone, a computer, and a reporter draws those three items and then is challenged to connect them and find how they could possibly be related to each other. And with Connect the Dots, what we tried to do is we're not just showing you the end result of what this reporter finds, but we're taking you along for the journey. So you're seeing all the emails sent, all the calls made, and the goal here is not only to provide a fun vehicle for watching a story, but also to kind of uncloak how journalism is done and what it's like to make calls and not get answers, to send emails and find the right person and do those interviews and do that research before those interviews. So it's kind of a behind the scenes of journalism while also giving the viewer what I think and I hope is a fascinating story at the end.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that unpacking in just a second. So your episode aims to connect the World Series, access to water, and microwaves. So let's just look at a short clip of it right here.
My name is Fernando Hurtado, and this is Connect the Dots, where we find out how three seemingly unrelated items are related to each other. Microwaves, World Series, access to water. So I have to find out how these three are related.
Okay, so this turns, as you're just saying, this turns into a story that's in many ways as much about the reporting process as the subjects themselves. So, I mean, when you look at the sort of the remit for this overall series, was that the aim? Was it primarily? I mean, the subjects are all arbitrary because they're literally pulled out of a hat, so to speak. Is it really just about unpacking the process, demystifying the reporting process? Was that the primary MO?
The primary MO was that, as well as showing that different aspects of our lives are really truly connected to each other. And it's not a trite expression. I think if you really look closely, you will find links between different types of things. And we've seen it time and time again through stories that have developed over the years and unfolded. But then the really exciting opportunity there was like, yeah, we don't just want to do that and show that things are connected, because like I said, in a lot of ways, a lot of stories do that. But yes, we want to demystify the process of journalism, because I think so often you see the finished piece on TV or online, but it's not very often that you get to see what goes into making that story. And I think for the reporters involved, that was also a lot of fun, and it allowed them to breathe a little too, to kind of just vlog that and play with that a little, and be brutally honest of like, hey, I sent like 10 emails. I heard back from one person, which if you're a journalist listening, that happens more often than not.
Par for the course. There's a lot of ellipses in these stories. The next day, 2 days later, 5 emails later, kind of thing, for sure. Is part of showing that process to viewers who are not in this business, is it about trust a little bit, about showing, to kind of trying to rebuild that trust relationship?
Totally. I think it goes with the whole show your work. We're so used to doing that in school, show your work, you do your math homework, show your work, show your work. And I think in journalism, we're surrounded by journalists. So, I know probably how you got your story, and I know like what went into that. And I trust you because I know what it takes to do journalism. But I think sometimes we forget that the larger audience, they're not as familiar with, an assignment desk or pitches or, reading through peer-reviewed journals and all that jargon, and then reaching out to experts that are reputable to kind of explain these larger, more complicated issues. So I think it's totally about honesty. It's about transparency. It's about trust. And it's about demystifying. I think that word you use is really good, about demystifying the process of journalism.
And then at the end, the serendipity of discovery, because you do connect these dots, and they are, and it's sort of remarkable the ways in which they do. It doesn't feel terribly forced to have to find those pathways eventually. One of the things I've liked about your work in the past, and you see it here as well, there's a kind of breezy visual vocabulary, not just to your story here, but to all of these connect the dots stories. And I'm interested, how did you arrive at this particular manner of presentation for this series, and what are you using here tools wise?
Yeah, so for context here, this idea came at a time, I think it was winter of last year. I was watching a lot of true crime series, as we all were, and I was captivated by the stickiness of these series, where it's a process piece, and one of them was about this young man trying to figure out the murder of his mom and who did it, and he takes you along for the trip, like going to the police, going to the police and asking them questions, and literally vlogging it. And you're kind of like wondering what's going to happen. What's he going to find out? Is he going to find out? So I thought, okay, how do we bring that into journalism? Not in a true crime way, but how do we bring that trope of true crime, a process piece, to straight journalism? So in order to do that, I felt like you really did need to show like, and build up that question of like, is this reporter going to be able to connect the dots? So it was totally about vlogging it and being a little more raw, a little more unfiltered, unpolished, so to speak, and showcasing that. So I think from the get-go, and talking to the team here at NBC LX, we've always kind of done that vlog style, take me along storytelling. So it just felt even more natural for this series to continue to do that.
So what are literally the tools, both hardware and software, that are employed in this?
So for the vlogging, a lot of the reporters use Osmo cameras. I don't have it on me, but I think I talked about it when I had another panel with you. I love that thing. It's this tiny little camera that makes it secondhand. I would say even easier than a phone, because a phone, you still got to turn it around and do all that. It's really a stick. You press record. It makes it super easy to vlog, and it has a gimbal on it. So it's a steady cam. So it looks pretty polished, but still kind of that blog style. So it was a ton of that stuff. We were still heavy, with restrictions from the pandemic. So it was a lot of Zoom interviews for this. Some of our, like Boston, for example, our reporter in Boston, Rob Michelson, he was able to go out into the field. His story was about, the Boston Marathon. So it made sense for him to be out in the field a little more. My piece was the pilot. So I did that a little earlier on. So that was a lot of Zoom interviews. And then the bulk of it, I think, is post-production. It's the pacing, it's the editing. So we were using Adobe Premiere and a set of graphics that we built in, After Effects, just MOV alpha files that we laid over, and then certain custom graphics for each episode. Like obviously the emails we were sending to people were different. So it was just a template that we changed there. But I would say the bulk of this was for sure just vlogging a ton production wise with your phone or the Osmo. And then a lot of editing work to make it flow. And also we left a ton on the cutting room floor of like the vlogging part, and that's a good problem we found ourselves in. I'm like, okay, we vlogged way more than we needed to, which is good. I mean, my piece is 17 minutes long, and I think that's a good amount of time.
Yeah, 17 minutes is, most of these pieces hover in that just below 20-minute range, don't they?
Yes. So we really wanted to, make it an OTT play with this. Mm-hmm. And play up the fact that NBC LX does premium, news content. So we wanted to hover in that range so that if you did love the series, you had, close to like 60 more minutes of content you could watch if you wanted to on the spot, because we released them all in a binge this format.
Okay. And what was the time from the conception of this particular episode to its completion?
So it varied for my episode. Mine was the pilot episode. So we were kind of trying to figure out if the idea even worked. Because when I pitched it to my bosses at NBC LX, I'm so fortunate that they were like, this is weird and strange, but go for it. Let's see if it works. Give us a proof of concept. So that's what that first episode that's what that first episode was. And it took, I would say, for the gathering of materials, it took close to 2 months. And then the editing itself took less than 2 weeks. And then most of them average in that range, because also this didn't make it into the pieces, but when we were reaching out to people for interviews and explaining the concept, there were, we weren't in the thick of the pandemic. So they were like, oh, wow, you guys must be bored. Is there no other story to do? And I think we were like, no, this is like a good de-stressor given all the stories we're doing. So we were taking our time with it and kind of doing it kind of on the side and not really rushing the process, trying to get those good connections. So I would say about a month and a half to 2 months per episode. And they were obviously being done simultaneously across the country.
And there are 4 episodes in total so far, correct? And you're working not just yourself, but this is, or the national LX team, but then specific stations who have an LX person there are iterating these as well, right?
Yeah, so we work super closely with all of our NBC owned stations. So in this case, we collaborated with NBC Boston, NBC New York, and Telemundo Arizona, because the Telemundo station group is also part of our family. And yeah, so we made that proof of concept, sent that out to those 3 reporters who are digitally native or very digitally savvy reporters already. So it was really easy to give them the concept and let them just run with it. And then, along the way, we'd have check-ins of like, how's it going? Which direction are you going? Do you need help with any contacts or anything like that? And that's where like we would all kind of brainstorm and help them out. But for the most part, I mean, these people are super connected with their local communities. So they didn't need much help with the reporting. And then for the editing, we edited them in-house at NBC, on the NBC LX side. NBC Boston, Rob Michelson, he edited his own piece. I just sent him the graphics package, and that was it. But I think the other thing to point out too is that to localize these episodes, the NBC LX one could kind of be a little more location agnostic because we're kind of all over the country. With Telemundo Arizona, we made the events, for instance, all the names of the events in that bowl specific to Arizona, so that there'd be a little more value for their local audience, but still interesting to a national audience.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk to you about the series also largely as a way into looking at the visual vocabulary of TV news, which is sort of an obsession I have. these stories and a lot of what NBC LX does, they do a lot of things that conventional TV news just doesn't. There's an informality to the address. The reporting deconstructs itself as the story progresses. The veneer of the storytelling itself is different. So I'm just wondering more broadly, why does a reporter like yourself want to play with the conventions of TV news? Do you find it just because those conventions aren't relevant to younger audiences anymore?
I think it's because we know what works, and we know that's a successful format of delivering news. And I think the way that the scripted TV world works, where there's like so many ways you could take content in, I think with the unscripted world, there's just as many ways you can take formats and presentation in. And I think we're just now beginning to kind of uncover those. I think because there was kind of this feeling of like, oh, this works. And so let's just reiterate, and kind of keep building.
40 years or more, really.
Yeah, and I think now we're our audience, at least, like that persona is consuming content, not just on YouTube, not just on TikTok, not just on TV too. So I think they also have like a little bit more of a flexible eye, so to speak, that like, it doesn't have to be as polished. It doesn't have to be as super like tied up. It can be a little more authentic, I think, and a little more informal, like you said. So I think it's, at least for me as a content producer, it's super exciting to say, hey, what can we take from like the scripted world and what formats that work? An idea that I've been having, but I haven't really like fleshed out, is like, how do we take the game show aspect and gamify the news? I think in a way, Connect the Dots kind of does that by making this an adventure, so to speak. There's no prize at the end, but you kind of want to see whether or not this person will win or lose. And hopefully you're a little invested in that. So I think, yeah, there's this, world of opportunities for formats. Like, I'm so excited by different formats we could try. And I think at LX, we're constantly like pitching what some might consider kind of like out of the box ideas, which I think they are, but I think a lot of the times they really do work, or they resonate with our audience.
I find that phrase you just used, a flexible eye, to be very compelling with younger audiences. That's the way to characterize them. Do you think that news audiences, especially younger ones, almost need this kind of shakeup in presentation now in order to be engaged?
I think they just need variety. It's kind of like the variety show worked for so long on TV for a reason, because I think, not to get too meta here, but I think as humans, like we crave that diversity in life, but also in content. So I think, especially with this audience, that we can basically get content whenever we want it, how we want it. If I feel like watching a 5-minute YouTube video, I know how to find it. If I feel like watching a 60-minute docuseries, I know where to find it. So I think this audience has an appetite for long form content. And I think if you find like a more visually stimulating way to present it, that's a little different, that's another way to keep kind of their eyeballs on that content.
So there are, as I mentioned, 4 Connect the Dots episodes so far. Is there more coming to this series, or is it wrapped?
We're in the process of exploring that. One idea I had was, hey, what if we took the Connect the Dots concept and did it all around climate change? Climate change is an issue you could split 10,000 different ways. And if we made all the issues in that bowl related to climate change, and then we do like a 6-episode series on climate change. So there's a lot of excitement from the reporters and the stations who worked on it, which I was really excited to see, because I think, we really count on these stations where they're like, it's almost like, these people are so busy. So I was like, that's why I was like, take your time with it, have fun with it. But when we have buy-in from them, it's really exciting, because to me, it means that it resonates with them, and it also resonates with their audience, which, grabs a little bit from that local audience, for at least for these digital reporters at NBC Boston, for example. It also grabs on, linear and digital a bit there.
So before I let you go, any other projects underway at LX, kind of boundary pushing things that we should be keeping an eye out for in the next months?
Yeah, we just announced man-controlled football on NBC LX, so it's kind of our foray into sports, which I think is like so fitting, and it's so exciting. I know nothing about football, so that's all I'll say about it, but it's exactly what it sounds like. So that's something that I'm personally really excited about. for the Olympics, I would keep a close eye on our Olympics content. We're working on our second season of our My New Favorite Olympian podcast. I think that gets us like out to like 3 months from now. And there's more stuff down the line.
All right. Looking forward to it all. Fernando Hurtado, reporter at NBC LX. Always good to talk to you and to see what you're working on. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. A new episode of Talking TV is available most Fridays on TVNewsCheck.com. You can also listen and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify.